All right, in this part of the series, we will be doing some data analysis, specifically using the Pandas library, which is a library developed for data cleaning, exploration, manipulation, and analysis. And this library is widely used in the field of data science. So it's definitely one of the tools that you can add to your tool belt. Now, before we start using this particular library, let's understand what a library is in general and how powerful this component can be to use in any project. So a library is simply a pre-written code that users can use to optimize tasks. All right. Now, think of a library as a bunch of functions that you can use in your project. So that's basically what we mean by pre-written code. All right. Some examples of libraries include the NumPy library, which is basically a library that contains mathematical functions that revolves around uh, arrays and matrices and some other functions. Another example, we have the SciPy library, which is a scientific library that can be used, for example, for signal processing. We have the matplot library, which is a library used for creating plots and different data visualizations. Scikit-learn library, which is a library used for creating statistical analysis models and machine learning models. The Pandas library is used for data analysis, as we mentioned. So as you can see, we have so many libraries we can tap into. Now, as we talked about, a library basically contains a lot of predefined functions because, as we mentioned before, we have or functions comes in many forms, right? We have user-defined functions. These are the ones that you, the user, define them and then you call them in your project. Also, we have built-in functions that were already predefined by someone sorry, by the language itself, and all you have to do is just to call these functions and integrate them in your project, like the min function, max function, and the mean function, for example. A third type of functions uh, are library contained functions. These are the functions that you can only use once you import a particular library. All right, these functions are also predefined, so all you need to do is to simply call them and use them in your project. All right. Now, the reason using libraries in your project is important is because so many functions, so many functionalities are very hard to hard code yourself because they simply require subject matter knowledge in certain cases. So, for example, the NumPy library contains some heavy mathematical functions that were written by mathematicians in this case, right? The scikit-learn library contains functions that require some heavy machine learning knowledge that were created by some experts in the machine learning sector or field, right? So as you can see, using libraries can go a long way in helping you develop and optimize your different data analyses or projects. All right. Now, uh, in this part, we will be using mainly the Pandas library, which is, as we agreed, a library used for data analysis. And it mainly processes data that comes in a tabular format because there are some other formats for data that we will be introduced to later on in this series or some other series. But for now, the Pandas library handle tabular data or simply table data. Now, some of the functionalities or the tasks that we can carry out using this library include, for example, cleaning the data, right? We can, for example, change the format of certain data points, right? So this is one format, we can change it to this format. Another task includes exploring the data, right? We can, for example, study the correlation between two variables. So if one variable increases, does the other variable increase or decrease, right? We can also use it for data manipulation, where we can, for example, reduce the number of rows or simply eliminate certain rows in our table. And finally, we can use it for data analysis, where we can, for example, group the data by a certain column. We can study certain trends or look for certain trends. We can use some statistical functions in order to uh, uh, obtain certain insights that we can work with. Now, the Pandas library mainly contains two classes, right? We have the series class and we have the data frame class. And as we discussed before, Python is an object-oriented programming language, right? And the libraries that supports the Python language or that were developed using the Python language also are centered around the object-oriented paradigm, right? And that basically means that inside these libraries, specifically the Pandas libraries, we have classes from which we can create objects and work with these objects. Again, the Pandas library contains classes that we can instantiate or we can create objects from them to work, to store and process the data tables we have. Now, as we mentioned, we have two main classes, right? We have the series class and we have the data frame class. You can think of the series as simply a one-dimensional array or a one column in a table, right? So for example, a series could be the name column, which contains in this case 4 rows, starting from 0 all the way to 3, because remember, indices start from 0 all the way to the number of rows minus 1. So we have 0, 1, 2, and 3. So again, we have the name column with 4 rows. Data frame, on the other hand, consists of multiple columns, or simply multiple series, since a series represents one column, right? So a data frame could be this table consisting of these 3 columns: the name column, age column, and zip code. Now, how many rows do we have in this table? 0, 1, 2, we have 4 rows with the indices or indexes 0, 1, 2, and 3. All right. Also, think of a data frame as a list of series, since a series is one column. Okay, and that's it. All our work will be centered around these two main classes. We'll create objects from them and work on these objects. Now, what are the main components of any class? As we said before in the last tutorial, it consists of attributes and methods. Attributes and methods. And since series and data frames are classes, means that each one of them contain attributes and methods that we can use on the objects that we create from these classes. So for example, with the class series, we have certain attributes like the dtypes attribute, which basically gives you the data type of the column you are dealing with. Name, which is the name of the series or the column. Shape, for example. Values, right? On the other hand, we have these methods or functions, but as we agreed, functions within the context of a class are called methods. So in the class series, we have the head function that we can apply to an object from this class series. We have the filter method, and we have, for example, the fill any method. Now, later on, we will talk in more depth about these methods and how we can use them and what is the expected output after we call them, right? Similarly, we have the class data frame, right? Which also consists of attributes and methods. For example, we have the dtypes attribute, the axes, the look, the values, right? As for the methods, we have the head method, right? Which basically obtains the first 5 rows in the data frame or table, info, pub, fill any, etc., etc. Again, we will talk about these in more depth later on. But for now, just understand at this point that we have two main classes within the Pandas library, series and data frames. We use series in order to represent a column or one-dimensional array of data, whereas we use the data frame in order to contain a complete table of data. All right. Now, in the next part, we will start coding using the Pandas library and apply different methods on a sample dataset. I'll see you then. Thank you.